Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We are digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave. We'd love to hear where you think we got it right and where we got it wrong. You can do that by visiting unsilentpodcast.com, visit Rumble or Facebook or any of the various social media places that add so much to our daily enjoyment of life. I think. Maybe I'm being hyperbolic with that one, Brian. What do you think?
Perhaps a little.
Maybe a little. All right. So, some monumental events. We are on, let's see.
Yeah.
What version of the war are we at right now? Is it 160 or 165?
Yeah, I think we are now 168-0.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
Keeping track correctly.
Yeah, so we're back at war.
By the way, so the rockets and missiles and drones have been exchanging for the last 3-4 days, whatever it is, with Iran, of course. Today, Trump tweets out at like 4:00 Eastern or whatever.
Right.
Iran just called. They want to talk.
Yeah. Hi, I totally hear. Of course.
And of course, Iran is saying we're not going to initiate talks. We're not reaching out. So I do have to say I find myself in this awkward and undesirable position where sometimes I honestly trust what the Iranians are saying more than what we're saying. I don't think that's accurate 100% of the time. I think there's plenty of times they're gonna lie and think that stuff too. Yeah. But man, you just can't say a guy's calling you. I'm gonna give my best estimate of how many times he said a version of that. I'm gonna say it's somewhere around 40 or 50 times. He said they're aching for a deal. They can't wait. They're eager to work with us. They've called all the things.
Yeah.
And after a while, it's like, come on, it's just not true. Stop it.
Right.
Just stop.
Right. Well, I am in marketing for a living, and I try to be able to detect spin. And when I look at Iran and the U.S. right now, I take nothing that I hear from anybody at all in either of those things seriously. I just take none of it seriously. The only guy, now I will tell you that I'm a big Marco Rubio fan. And so whenever he talks, I listen very carefully to what he says, because most of what I hear him say is carefully accurate, because I know enough about the guy. I mean, I don't know, but I know, to use a Candace Owens phrase, that he is, he doesn't necessarily agree with everything that's being done. You can see that in the way that things transpire. So he doesn't necessarily agree with all that. He's too smart, frankly, to agree with everything that's being done. But when he says stuff, he's, I think, pretty careful to walk the line where he's saying things that are objectively correct, even if the rest of the stuff that he's not saying is stuff like the president says that I'm pretty sure that Rubio doesn't agree with. So he's one of them that I listen to that I think is pretty solid. I think, if we're keeping score, I think that JD Vance believes most of what he says, most of what JD Vance says. Trump speech for Trump is, in my estimation, exactly what it is for the Iranians. It's a means to an end. It's not a thing that's meant to communicate, fundamental truth. It's a thing that's meant to accomplish an outcome. It's like a hammer, or, so therefore, whether it's true or not, or to what degree it is, it really is a bit irrelevant to him. And so therefore, that's a long way of me saying, I agree with you that, neither of them are spinning the tale. It's accurate.
Yeah. I was listening today, just kind of in the background as I was working on some stuff. JD Vance was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I didn't make it all the way through. I was, like I said, just kind of background noise. But I did pay attention when Joe Rogan asked him something like, would you have done this Iran thing the same way?
Yeah.
And he's JD Vance is a politician.
Yes.
I think he's an ethical guy. I would trust him to babysit my kids if they were little kids. I don't think he'd steal from me or hurt my kids or anything. I think he's a good dude.
Yeah.
But he kind of does this kind of aw shucks, laugh it off, kind of, well, it's not really my place to. Uh, but he does kind of, after he kind of does deflectionary laugh thing, he does kind of circle back around and like, you know, essentially, if I remember correctly, it was something like none of us would do it exactly the same way as another person. There's parts I agree with, parts I don't agree with, but so it's kind of that
Yeah,
political
yeah,
kind of talk.
safe.
And he said a few things that were, Iran can't have nuclear weapons, and he kind of went back to some of the talking points.
Sure.
I do get the sense that Trump is he's an odd force of nature, and I agree with you 100% that the accuracy or honesty of their words don't matter nearly as much as moving the needle through
Yes.
this mechanism of media or interviews or whatever to get the needle moved in the direction he wants, and
Right.
that comes paramount over accuracy and truth and things like that. And I think for the people he has surrounded himself with, which I think are by and large fairly ethical people,
Sure.
I can't put anybody in the cabinet and go, well, Ludnick, I probably would not. I wouldn't trust him with my wallet probably, but um, not that I have enough money to get his attention. Like,
Maybe
but
not.
if I had $100 million, I wouldn't trust him with my wallet
Sure.
probably. But there's a couple things like that. But I think that they are trying to navigate this like landmine field that they're walking through. Of
Right.
you can't fully support him,
Yeah.
but you sure as hell can't fully oppose him. Like
Right.
he just light you up.
Yeah.
And I guess all that to say, I don't envy any of them.
Oh yeah, I mean, they're all pretty much playing the the kind of wait and see, and hopefully get through the whole thing without
Yeah,
getting too much of a bloody nose, or without creating. I think probably especially for Vance and for Rubio, I think their strategy is get through it without creating too many sound bites that can be used against them in the future.
100%,
I mean,
100%.
that's
Yeah, don't make the mistake Kamala Harris made on The View.
well, yeah. Don't
And
make
I'm
the
being
mistake
serious
that.
about that. I think that her answer to that, what would you have done differently? And she said nothing. I think that was the end of it for her.
Oh, sure. Well, yeah, I certainly agree with that. I think the end of it for her is when she started opening her mouth. That was probably the pretty much the end of it for
Well,
her.
there was there was more people willing to tolerate her blathering prior to her saying, "Nope, I'm 100% behind everything Biden
Yeah,
did." Than there were people after.
yeah. No, I think
Again,
that's true.
I would have voted for you before I voted for her if it came down to that. Luckily, I wasn't put in that position.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Ah, yes. Well, there you go. So that's the Iran situation, and so what's your prediction on how it's actually going to turn out? What do you think?
I can't say anything specific, but I to be completely honest, I don't see the path to a positive outcome.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know exactly what it's going to be. I don't know how much more ramping things up either side will do. I just don't think that either party is really interested in a compromise or a negotiation in which a compromise is where
Right,
we reach an outcome that neither party is really happy with, but we can live with, right? That's kind of
right.
my version of like what a compromise is. I don't think either camp is open to that. So any
Yeah.
other alternative is more likely, in my opinion, than that.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the only way to answer my question in my mind is to go back to the things that are factual. And one of the factual things is for the Iranian, mentality, they don't have very many cards, and we'll use the Trump thing. They don't have very many cards, but they have some very, very strong ones. The ones that they do have are very, very strong. One of them is that they can survive anything. I mean, they
Yep.
basically can survive anything. So when you are indestructible, when you're Superman in terms of indestructibility, that is a very strong card. So they can survive being bombed as long as we want to keep throwing. We'll run into
Yep.
bombs before they give up. And,
Yep.
and number two, they are committed to, from a survival perspective, they're committed to not showing weakness. So because
Right.
if they show weakness, then given the culture, and given that if you look at the Middle East, it's 50 some odd nations, Islamic nations, depending on where you divide the line. I mean, there's in Asia as well, but there's a ton of Islamic nations that are in that area, and if you understand sort of that mentality, showing weakness is what gets you killed. So those two things being said, they are not going to compromise on things. they can't give up the only few cards that they've got. I mean, I could see
Yeah.
them potentially giving up the nuclear stuff because they don't need that anymore because now they know that the Strait of Hormuz is just as powerful as a nuclear bomb. Um,
Yeah.
so and then with Trump, what the things that if you just take the things that we do know, the most important fact about the Strait of Hormuz is the midterm elections. That is the most important thing about the Strait of Hormuz. So having a oil at 120 or 130 in November is a non-starter. So he will do whatever he has to do to make sure that that doesn't happen. And so that means that he's going to have to give in some way, shape, or form.
I want to go back to what you said about what Iran's options are in a second, but
Yeah.
on the last thing you said there about Trump, the midterms being paramount.
Yeah.
I heard an interesting argument yesterday. Now I'm going to talk about things that I'm not educated or aware enough to speak with authority. Part speculation, part perception, part like how the world works. So take what I'm going to say for what it's worth, right? But I heard the argument from somebody a couple of days ago that I thought, man, that's an interesting perspective, and that was basically our soft underbelly as a country is the economy.
Mm-hmm.
When I say the economy, I mean unemployment. I mean the stock market valuation. I mean the people's
Inflation.
perception that they can go get jobs. Like I mean all that stuff. I don't have any glossary term when I say economy. I just mean
Sure.
like all that soup of stuff, right? If Trump doesn't believe that he can keep the economy propped up for, let's say, the next 6 years, his last 2 years, and whoever Rubio, JD Vance, whoever his successor would be, to not set them up for complete failure. If he doesn't believe he can keep the economy propped up for 2 years or 6 years, why wouldn't he want the economy to fall after losing the midterm so he can blame the Democrats?
Well, yeah, I mean, there is that strategic kind of calculation. So, yeah, I mean, I think.
Now, I'm not saying that's plan A for him. I'm not saying he's shooting for that. I'm saying it's not the worst possible outcome to lose the midterms. You lose the House. I can't remember. There's one that they're likely to lose and one that they're not likely to lose.
Yeah.
I think they're going to keep the Senate probably, but lose the House.
Yeah.
He'll get impeached. All the whole shit show will start over that we had in the first term. And but then you have a villain for when things start to fall apart. And there's a pretty good argument to be made that without a lot of government interference, the economy would not be looking as rosy as it is. The metrics that people like me and you care about, like, mortgage defaults, auto loan defaults, credit card balances, delinquencies, and all those same things, unemployment, GDP minus AI infrastructure build out, like all the things you and I care about are not good at all. Right. It's all AI and Trump tweets kind of keeping the market going, keeping it afloat, right?
Yeah, it's Axios.
So I thought, okay, well, I was kind of like thinking what you were saying a minute ago, like, okay, well, he's got to win the midterms. Like, he's got to do whatever it takes. But well, maybe not. Anyhow, I don't want to get sidetracked too much on that, but I don't think that's a horrible plan B for him as far as his legacy, which I think he cares about tremendously. If he can say the stock market hit the top tick the night before the election in 2026, and after we lost the midterms, it all fell apart. I don't think that hurts his legacy, in his opinion. Right?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think that's true. Yeah. And there's no doubt that he's most interested in his legacy above anything else.
For sure.
I wonder in that formulation whether how concerned he is about the next 4 years, about the next years after he's gone. I kind of question whether he's.
I don't think it's much. I think he would care more if it was somebody from his cabinet because it would help his legacy, of course, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think he cares anywhere near as much as he cares about his term.
Yeah,
for sure.
I'm sure that's true.
Yeah, and then going back to the Iran's position in this whole thing. Again, I'm going to talk about things that I'm not a military expert, like a lot of things. I'm not a global economy expert, but it does seem that Iran has been hitting the same like 6 or 7, 8, whatever it is, targets in the surrounding countries every night.
Yeah.
They're hitting the same targets over and over and over again. Now we keep saying, our news media keeps saying, oh, that's no big deal. We're catching them, we're shooting them out of the sky and whatever. But there's tricklings of news coming out that actually that's not really the case. Like maybe an airstrip was destroyed or whatever. Who knows, right? My point is, and I heard this from somebody else again, this is not my idea. Iran only has to hit 10 targets or 6 targets or whatever it is.
Sure.
We have to hit all the nearly infinite number of locations those things are fired from.
Right.
All right. So that's one problem. They're spending $5,000 or $10,000 per drone, and we're spending a couple $1 million per missile. That's not fair.
Right.
And again, all they have to do is survive, and we have to get them to bend on some major things. The Strait of Hormuz
Right.
probably being number one now. The nuclear thing is probably, I don't know, fourth or fifth place at this point. Like,
Yeah.
um, and we have to punish them so severely that they want to cave. They can punish the rest of the world so much that we have to cave.
Yeah.
They don't have to just hurt us. They can hurt all these countries that don't have, billions of gallons of oil reserves or what. Again, this one
Yeah.
I'm talking outside of my scope of like how they mechanically would impact them, but it will mechanically impact them. That much I
Yeah.
can be confident in. And then the last thing is, I don't see where we're really protecting these Gulf Coast countries. I don't see we're really stopping this. Like, we seem to be somewhat impotent to stop these attacks. So they can inflict enough damage on Bahrain or UAE or Oman or
Oman. Yeah.
whatever it is, that they go, okay, well, we're sitting here getting punched in the face over and over again. You guys aren't able or willing to help us out. So I guess we're kind of on our own, and we're going to have to kind of negotiate something with Iran ourselves. That's certainly on the table. There's no
Oh
reason
yeah.
that couldn't happen.
Yeah.
So when you look at all the different variables like that, it does not feel like this, David versus Goliath scenario to me. It feels
Oh no.
pretty close as far as strategic abilities that are not the same. Like, we have much more kinetic strengths, of course, but the rules of the game are stacked in their favor, it feels like to me.
Oh yeah. Well, because they're basically Rocky. When the whole piece of the Rocky movie is that he can just get hit and hit and hit, and he just keeps getting
Right.
up. He keeps getting up. Dolph Lundgren was was the super
Rocky
trained
Ford.
Soviet,
Yeah.
and he's like, man, I hit the guy with everything I've got. And he won't go down. He won't go down.
Yeah.
And that's basically what we have here. We just keep hitting them and hitting them and hitting them. They won't go down. And yeah, it's now the interesting thing. The only thing I could see that possibly changes this on a kinetic level is you notice that the president is now very more complimentary of Vladimir Zelensky. And the reason is, of course, because Ukraine is the world's leader in drone technology. I mean, they're sending drones.
Oh, really? Okay.
They're
Interesting.
sending
All right.
drones all over the world. I mean, they hit, I think it was like it was either 60 or 90, Ukraine did like either 60 or 90 Russian ships in the past like week or something, in the month of, or the last couple of
Wow.
weeks. So
Okay.
they are, I mean, the tide of the war is, I mean, it's not, they're not marching on Moscow right now, but the tide of the war has significantly changed. They sunk a ship that was one of Putin's apparently protection ships outside of one of his retreats. I mean, so they're harassing the Black Sea. Anyway, we are now starting to use drone technology, and apparently some of that technology has come from Ukraine, and so that's why there was some the president just met with Vladimir Zelensky and was very complimentary to him, which is new because
That's
before
a
it
tone
was
change,
that was changed. Before it was like, hey, they don't have any cards. He's got no cards. Well, Zelensky's got the cards now and seems to be able to. And Zelensky it's an interesting parallel between Russia and Ukraine, because Zelensky is the one that they just keep hitting and he won't go down. So
Yeah.
Russia is Dolph Lundgren in the analogy, and Ukraine is Rocky in this analogy, and they seem to be. So the way that you could potentially get around all the stuff that's happening in Oman, UAE, all those, is with more advanced technology. We started to use sea drones now for the first time.
I saw that.
And so that's new. So there may be some shifts there. Now, the other thing I think is worth pointing out is that over probably the next several years, the Strait of Hormuz is going to become less and less and less important, because they're building pipelines and they'll find ways to ship the oil around. Maybe they'll build it. If you look at how that whole peninsula is, you could just maybe make a canal on the Oman side and you're good to go. So this is a short term.
In 5 years, there's either a canal or a pipeline to make this relatively moot. Not entirely, probably, but but enough for them not to have this leverage anymore. But they still got 5 years.
They still got some. Yeah, they still have time.
That's plenty of conflicts. That's more than enough.
And the interesting thing will be how much now they do have, as much as I've talked about all that, they do have significant incentive to get something resolved because their economy is in free fall. I mean, it's been in free fall for a long time, and they can probably keep it in free fall for a long time. But that does have an impact, and at some point, who knows when, and that's the thing, nobody knows when. Our experts don't know when, nobody knows when, that will have some kind of significant impact. But we can't predict that, and so therefore we're just stuck at 168 still. Oh, there you go.
Yeah. The other thing I think is a variable that nobody that I've been able to hear can put their finger on this, and that is how much of oil did not go to $200 like many people were predicting,
right.
200-300, like we were hearing those kind of numbers pretty regularly there in the first few weeks. It didn't happen. There's a theory that we've talked about on here that China just kind of did everybody a favor and drew down the reserves and like to kind of smooth things over. There's also a theory that the economic slowdown that has been talked about, starting a couple of years ago, but getting more and more, adamant, fervent, kind of people talking about it more urgently about the pending, recession. Listen, this stuff happens. I'm not.
Yeah.
It happens like clockwork. Like, so you can't make it so we don't have recessions. I'm cool with recessions. It's part of the deal. I'm okay with that. But there is a theory, a counterbalancing theory that, okay, well, yeah, China might have done some stuff, but what if the slowdown that we've been talking about for the last year, 6 months, 2 years, whatever, depending on how, when people started getting on board with that idea, what if that's happening and oil consumption is just down because things are down? Like China's, their GDP numbers or whatever it was came out yesterday and they were not all that favorable. And, there's plenty of indication, again, going back to credit cards, mortgages, auto loans, delinquencies, defaults, all that stuff. Plenty of case to be made. If you took AI out of the picture, things are not great for really anybody else.
Yeah.
So what if this happened just coincidentally with this major global slowdown economically, and we're just not using as much oil because we're not shipping as much stuff, because we're not building as much stuff, because we're not buying as much stuff? That could be a factor here. So a long way to get to, I think the pain imposed on other countries is a variable that we don't have a handle on yet, and I think that's a major factor in how this will resolve. So when I say I don't know, but it's not going to be good, it's because I don't know how much pain people are in yet, but there is a threshold that they will not endure any longer. I don't know how close we are to that.
Well, that's true, and I think the one part of that to me is very interesting, and I don't know why we haven't seen more or heard more about it, is the richest economies in the world are the United States, Europe, and China. And so we see what the US and China are doing. But what's Europe been doing? I mean, they're suffering significantly because they do get, the president likes to point out that, well, we don't need the oil coming out of the Gulf. The Europeans need to let them deal with the problem. Well, he's right about that. They have a significant and they have significant issues of their own creation because they became so dependent on Russia, on Russian LNG and Russian energy, and then they had to cut themselves off because of the embargoes and the war. And so, but what is, you just don't hear hardly anything. You hear Germany and France talking about, well, maybe we're going to go down there and maybe we're going to do some stuff. But do you see the Brits down there? Do you see the HMS Dragon going? You don't see any of those kinds of things happening. So it is odd to me that all of that is so silent and there's not really much going on, at least on the surface. Now, it's also true. The other thing that's very important in this entire thing, and will become very important to Kenny G, is, or long before Kenny G, but it will impact his world more than ours has, is the fact that Europe is essentially collapsing and they can't do anything together. And so it could very well be that the reason that what I'm talking about is happening is because Europe is just the most dysfunctional family of rich people on the entire planet.
Yeah. Well, it was only again, I don't monitor this stuff. So I do remember maybe 18 months ago, 2 years ago, Germany was on the verge of like a real economic collapse. Like
Sure. Yeah.
really
Yeah.
bad things were happening.
Yeah.
And as of this week or last week or something like that, South Korea's stock market is down like 30% in like 14 days or something like that.
Yeah.
You don't have to look too many directions to see that things are not going well. So I don't know how much of it is because, like, using Europe specifically as an example, how much is because, well, we're using less oil anyway, so it's not that big of a deal, or they can't get their act together collectively to like do anything, or even individually to do anything,
Yeah.
and how much of it is like a you broke it, you fix it kind of position. I don't I don't know.
Yeah.
There's plenty of options to go around as far as why they're like so like you say kind of hands off on the whole thing.
Yeah.
I heard a few weeks ago like England or somebody sent a fleet there and then like they broke down halfway and they had to go back home and get fixed, but
Yeah.
they
Well,
were on the way. So somebody was sending ships of some sort to do something. I don't know what.
I think it actually was the pride of the English fleet that I mentioned, the HMS Dragon, got partway there and broke down. It's like, they used to be the predominant, sea power on planet Earth, and now they can't even
Yeah.
get a ship from. I mean, they did better in 1700s in terms of getting ships around the world than they do today, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
terribly depressing, honestly. I mean, that's
We
English
had to limp a
history.
ship home that, depending on if you believe the news or not, was either some kind of plumbing disaster or they got hit with some kind of drone or something like that that caused a fire.
Yeah,
We had to limp. Was it the Gerald Ford or something like that? That carrier group. We had to limp home or whatever.
yeah.
I, I think there's plenty of embarrassment to go around on that front.
Well, there is, and that's why I think from the Iranian perspective, they have the simplest kind of scenario of all. I mean, everybody's complex, and they're like, we're alive. That's all that matters. Shut up.
Yeah. We have to
That's
endure and survive such that you can't make us do things we don't want to do. Like
yeah.
that's it.
It's pretty
We're
simple. Yeah, it's pretty simple.
pretty unlikely you're going to invade. I guess if you do, we'll deal with that. But pretty unlikely that's going to happen because the American public doesn't have the appetite for it. And
Right.
and what are you going to gain? And all that kind of stuff. And you're going to have another 20-year war, and you can't afford it. You're $40 billion, $1 trillion in debt. Like,
Well, there are still a number. The other thing that's important to note, though, is there are still a number of potential real triggers. I mean, if, for instance, people are talking about, well, what if we took over Karg Island, or what if we bombed Karg Island, or what if we start bombing infrastructure? Well, if we start bombing infrastructure, and technically speaking, that's a war crime. We pay attention to those things, and the Iranians don't really care about that type of thing. But our inability, as you were talking about earlier, our inability to prevent the Iranians from launching into Bahrain and UAE and other places like that. Now they're pretty much, as I understand, they're pretty much shooting our bases that are in those places. We have troops based in those places, but our inability to prevent them from doing that would also say that we don't have the ability necessarily to protect the energy infrastructure of the Saudis or the Emiratis or any of those type of people. And now, if we start hitting them seriously hard and they start doing that, then you do have, $150 oil, $200 oil, something like that, because you really, so there are, so you could say that the Iranians are, and we are holding back to a certain extent. It's not all out war. It's mostly just people yelling at each other at this point and, sending missiles and drones.
Yeah, I think it's a fair characterization to say that both sides are restraining what they could do for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
I think there's no question about that. I guess so. How would you answer your own question? What's your prediction for how it resolves? I don't have one other than it's not going to be good.
I think I'm predicting that it's going to be a low level simmering conflict for probably 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
I think it's going to just because I don't know that there's any there. I don't think there is we don't have the physical technology unless we have a breakthrough in drone technology, unless we do unless we pull a Ukraine. If we're able to do that, if we're able to actually create like an iron dome kind of scenario around our fleet and around the bases and the energy infrastructure of the Middle Eastern partners, then at that point, sure, then we're essentially in control. And there's nothing they can do about it then. And we do control the Strait of Hormuz at that point. But outside of something like that, or outside of, the Europeans being able to get their act together, which I think is unlikely, then yeah, I think we've got a simmering conflict for 2 to 3 years. Trump will go away in, September, declare victory. We won, maybe he'll come up with a box and say, see, we got the dust, and yellow cake uranium, call it good. Something like that. I don't see any other resolution at this point.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I can predict is no matter how it turns out, the U.S. taxpayer is going to get screwed.
Yeah, well, yeah, sure.
That's the one thing I can count on.
That's been a part of the operating system for a long time. That's been a part forever.
All right, another big news this week. Senator Lindsey Graham died.
Mm-hmm.
Now you and I agree on much in the world, but we probably don't agree on Lindsey Graham
probably not
as much as other things. But you can't argue with the guy's effectiveness on certain things. Now, some things I would say he was not super effective on, but on some things, you can't argue with his. I don't know if I would say talent as a politician. Polarizing for sure.
Oh yeah.
I guess the as I've been thinking about the last couple of days, not that I study Lindsey Graham all that much. I honestly don't think about politicians at the federal level all that much. But
why not?
I did. I was listening to people talk about I learned some things about his career in the military and things like that, and it did kind of reshape my perspective. That I think that now looking back and having more context. I kind of feel like when you're a hammer, every solution is, or what is it? Every problem is a nail. When you're a hammer,
yes,
nail,
yeah,
right?
exactly, yeah.
A 30-year military guy, okay, how could it go any other way than every solution is going to be bombs and tanks and troops and okay, so I will give him a bit of a pass there. I still I think if I lived in South Carolina, I would be less than impressed with where his priorities were. But listen, everybody can say that about every politician, probably. Sure. So that's not a specific knock on him.
Sure. Well, I mean, so from my perspective on Lindsey Graham, he is, and I've been watching him for a long time. He's an old school politician. I think I look at and there's no question that there's plenty of stuff that he did that I didn't agree with. There's plenty of policy positions he took. There's things that I think he made mistakes on. Now, I would say over a 23-year career, 24-year career, I mean, there's things that I believed and did and thought in the time when he didn't believe and thought things that I wouldn't, support now either. So, looking back over that period of time, but the way that I look at him first is I look at him as a person, and I'm impressed with him as a person because he was single-minded in his pursuit of his priorities. He wasn't, and his priority was not what most politicians are. He's not a rich man. He didn't. You and
that you got to give him credit for sure.
Yeah, I mean, my net worth is bigger than his net worth, and he's a world famous guy. So he didn't go there to make money. He didn't make money. He sacrificed he never got married. He didn't have a wife. So he didn't do all the personally enriching things that almost all the politicians do. So I give him a lot of credit for that. I think he was part of the Gang of Eight. He's part of the buddies with John McCain, and there's plenty of stuff that John McCain did that I also didn't agree with. But from the standpoint of integrity, I think Lindsey Graham was a person of high integrity. I mean, especially, they've been floating it around. I watched it when it happened during the Kavanaugh hearings and his response to I think that was legit. I think his actual response. So as I look at him, I think of somebody who's more of an old school politician, not a current kind of politician. He's absolutely no question a hawk. And yeah, like you say, what else would he be when he was spent all that time in the military? He's been to Afghanistan. He's been deployed as a reservist to places that are bad things. And he's been involved in the establishment of, the military industrial complex establishment for a very long time. So I look at all that and I think, well, I see a person of integrity that I often disagreed with on, I recall one thing that I think, Tim Scott, the other South Carolinian who's got like a 91% rating as a conservative. He's rock solid conservative. Graham was like 52, 53%. regularly made liberals mad. He regularly made conservatives mad. But he didn't seem to care about that. He cared about his priorities. So from that perspective, I just look at him as a guy who was, I think, a politician that I could respect, even though there was plenty of times that I disagreed with him. There's plenty of politicians that I look at, and even if they agree with me and they do things I agree with more than he did, that I don't respect at all. I mean, there's lots of politicians. There's probably more. There are a lot more politicians that would agree with my positions more than I agreed with Graham's positions that I don't respect at all. And I respect Graham a lot more than that. So, that's kind of my perspective on him. And I also come from, as a kid of the Cold War, I have a very hawkish view on foreign policy myself, and just because you look at history and we're going to get into wars. That's kind of the way it is. So anyway, that's my thought on him.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I won't say anything else. I would say would just be rebuttals, and I don't want to do that. That's not a fair thing to do. The guy just died a couple days ago. Can't argue with the. I will say though, like, his net worth compared to Ilhan Omar.
Oh yeah.
he was in the federal government for going on 30 years, and I think his net worth was like 1.5 million or something like that.
Yeah.
Listen, I complain about a lot of things about the guy. There's some things he did I thought were absolutely despicable.
Yeah.
That ain't one of them.
Yeah.
I will give him credit for that.
Yeah.
All right. A couple other things I had. Well, I'm going to save I have kind of a interesting. Actually, I'll just play it now. Because when I first saved it, I thought, well, it's just going to be kind of a little funny chuckle thing. But now I'm kind of thinking it might not be such a funny chuckle thing. The SAVE Act is a big topic right now.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
The SAVE Act would make a federal requirement for people to show ID to vote, is my understanding. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes.
All right. Well, there's a Democrat senator. I think she's a senator. Is it Klobuchar? Is that her name?
Amy Klobuchar. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Alyssa Slotkin.
Oh, Slotkin. Sure. Yeah.
She has some thoughts what the SAVE Act would mean for Democrats, and I thought this was a super fascinating perspective that she has here. So here's what she's got to say. Oh, I gotta turn the. Hold on, stand by. I gotta turn the volume on.
The other thing that we blocked yesterday was the SAVE Act, right? Which was literally allow this administration to rig our democracy so that it would be hard for any Democrat in any state to win any election.
Okay, so I'm going to skip over the part where she says it's rigging the elections, because both parties say that, and they both, I'm sure, have the same percentage who are earnestly believing that and who are just saying what they think they're supposed to say. So I'm not going to focus on that part. I find it super interesting that she says if we pass the SAVE Act, no Democrat can win in any state in any election. And I'm trying not to be snarky. I'm trying not to be like that guy. I'm trying to be objective. But I'm telling you, Dave, it's tough. Like, okay.
Oh, I know exactly what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying.
His question is, why not?
Exactly right. So if you were to challenge her, it's like, so you're saying that if people have to demonstrate they're legit to vote, that you can't get enough legit votes to actually win.
Is this one of those fleeting moments where politicians think they're being poignant and think they're being grand and accidentally say the truth?
Yeah, it seems like, well, yeah, and she let it slip. She let the silent part slip, and even though it's not true, but it's still, yeah. I mean, that whole thing in you take that one and their recent foray into crazy redistricting that, of course, got shot down by the courts, crazy redistricting, and how can she even stand up there with a straight face and say something like that? How can she? I don't know. It's just
well, again, if she goofed up and said the truth, Dave, you would say the truth with a straight face.
Well, sure. Well, there you go. And so and she is probably right about that, because the dependence on illegal votes to, whether it's felons or dead people or, whatever, is skews heavily towards the Democrat side. So I think that's really true.
There's so many. I mean, I could spend 3 hours just talking about that little 14-second clip or whatever it was, because it is so revealing from my perspective of just like what the real game is, right? One of the things though that really strikes me is, well, I say one thing, but it's really a couple things. It's no longer about representation for the public. Like
Sure.
that concept is just it's just
Right.
not even part of the criteria. It's not even part of
Right.
the calculation anymore. It's just so gone.
Yeah.
They believe their job is to be the moral leaders,
Rule.
not the representatives. They are the righteous leaders
Yeah.
who it's upon them to shape how the country is supposed to work. I think that's how
Yes.
they believe.
Yes.
I think it's absolutely counter 180 degrees from what the country was founded on,
Totally.
which is you were supposed to represent what we want and go make the things we want happen, not
Right.
get enough people with power together to foist upon us how you want things. But that concept is long gone. Okay,
Yep.
fine. But if it really is, and so forget the illegal immigrants part. It comes down to party over country, and so when you take
Mhm.
those two pieces, for me, I think much of what frustrates me so much in this moment and articulating this to Kenny G in the future, what's it like to live in this moment? Well, for me, these are like the two things that are like everything kind of not everything, but many things can be boiled down to this is the root cause why these things happen.
Sure.
They don't believe that they're supposed to represent us, and they believe that the party has to come before the country because
Yes.
their job is to get enough people with power to make decisions to force upon us what they want.
Right.
I think that's kind of the crux of all the things that piss me off right now is
Yeah.
many of I don't know, 80%, 90%
Sure.
of things would come down to that.
Yeah.
Going back to the thing we talked about a month ago, 90% of legislation does not affect, or most legislation does not affect the 90%. It affects the 10%. Like
Right.
all these things are boiled down to this concept for me. Now, maybe I'm oversimplifying. What do you think?
No, I think that's exactly right. I think they think of themselves, and you can. I pay attention to this because you hear it sometimes when they talk about when the words that they use. They believe, and this happens on the right as well. They believe that they're elected as rulers. They're not elected, like you say, they're not elected as representatives. You know, and I don't know when that kind of gradual shift happened, but you know, at a certain point in our nation's history, a lot of what you would go back to Washington, D.C., and you would advocate for your district, for your state, for the people that you were sent to represent. And most of the issues that you would advocate for were not these, you know, grand sweeping, we're going to change society, we're going to change culture. They weren't like that. They were more grassroots kinds of issues. We're going to solve, you know, how do states negotiate with each other and make it fair crossing state lines? How does Kentucky get along with Florida? You know, stuff like that. And over time, it's become these hot button cultural issues where they become rulers to impose upon the people their set of ethics and morals, such as they are,
Yep, all that.
and not, you know, not respond to us. You know, there was a time, let's look at Bill Clinton. When Bill Clinton lost in his second term, and he's like, well, the era of big government is over, right? And he adapted to the will of the people. And,
Yep.
you know, Clinton, I'm not a big Clinton fan, was never a big Clinton fan, but he
Yeah.
adapted to the will of the people.
Yeah.
Now, if the will of the people, in that kind of situation, the politicians will say, well, the people are stupid. The people are idiots. They
Right.
shouldn't have done it because we are the elite. We know best. Just do what we say. And of course, the ultimate demonstration of that was how they behaved during COVID.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't necessarily disagree that, much of the population walking around living their lives at large, I don't think make terribly good decisions.
No, sure,
Yeah, I,
sure,
I can wrap my head around that.
yeah,
Still, the job description is representative.
right, yeah,
So I'm all for educating people more. I'm all for making us, less dopey in how we go about things. But when you said earlier, like we don't know when it's like when this change happened, one of the first thoughts that came to my mind was if I had to peg a president, like the last one to honor that, it was Bill Clinton. It was
sure,
100%. Um, W came along, and what do you know? The Patriot Act was chambered and ready to go, and we had the right reason, and within, like, I don't know, 16 minutes they passed the Patriot Act, which
right.
upended, I know,
Surveillance.
our entire history
Mm-hmm.
on certain fronts, like
Mm-hmm.
what the government was allowed to do and not do and things like that. And it hasn't gotten better since then. Like, that was,
Yeah.
for me, that was a defining moment of, like, okay, that is a specific outcome I can point to
Yeah.
and say, I'm not saying that was the beginning of the end. They had been plotting that and planning that for years in advance, obviously, because they can't pull legislation like that out of their behinds
Sure.
like that fast. That's not how it works. And enough of them were on board. So the intent was there before that, maybe in the late Clinton years or whatever, but they hadn't actually been able to pull it off. Well, that
Yeah.
was when they started to be able to pull these things off. And it is kind of ironic to look at Bill Clinton as the last representative it's in the Oval Office. You know, it is kind of odd. And I would say Trump had maybe he was going to do that in the first term, but he was so sidebarred with all the circus going on around. And this term, I don't think that's his intent at all.
No.
He's fully on board with all the swamp stuff now.
Well, and
anyhow,
I mean, if you look at it, there's a shared arrogance in the belief that the politicians can actually reform the world in their own image. I mean, this is really, I think, what's happened. It's like, it started during the Great Society programs of Johnson, of Lyndon B. Johnson, and this idea that, well, we can abolish poverty in our time. We've sent somebody to the moon. We can abolish poverty in our time. So there's an arrogance, and it's not an arrogance just of that we have the right knowledge and ability to do that. It's an arrogance to believe that human beings are not meant to walk around and be messy and just bump into things and get bloody noses. I mean, the fact, like what you were talking about earlier, they think that they need to control us because we're making bad decisions. Yeah, we're making bad decisions. Sure, we're making bad, and it's our right to make bad decisions. And it's actually not a bad thing that so many people run around and make a lot of these bad decisions because, look, they learn that's a bad decision, then they make a better decision next time. So,
and by the way, Mr. Government, either elected or unelected person, show me by virtue of things you've accomplished how you're any better.
Right. Yes, exactly.
We all do dopey things, but show me the evidence to support your notion that you don't.
And that's the genius of the representative republic that we have. It's the genius of a more democratic system, and that is that we can all be out here and we can all be flailing around in this, and somehow we flail around, we fall into the future. We kind of flail around, and when we get to the future, and well, look, it's better than it was 50 years ago. It's better than it was 30 years ago. How did we get here? We didn't get here because, brilliant Aristotelian, philosopher kings have gotten us here. We've gotten here because we all kind of bumped and fiddled and fumbled our way into the future and came up with something better on our own. If they understood that philosophy, if they had a notion that it's not a bug, it's a feature, it's the way it's supposed to be, then our society would be better, and we wouldn't have a swamp because we wouldn't invest so much power to control every aspect of society in the swamp. We would just let people do their thing, and there's guardrails. You don't go kill people. Yeah, sure, there's guardrails, but we wouldn't try to control everybody so much. And then if that happened, then our systems, our structures and our systems wouldn't collapse like they do during the fourth turning. I mean, the whole explosion of all of our systems during the last sets of years that lead up to the collapse in the fourth turning are because we've invested too much power in them because we had a false belief about why they exist in the first place.
Yeah, I would even say, if you just acknowledge and accept that humans are going to do dopey things at least a fair bit of the time, if not the majority of the time.
Yeah.
That supports the notion that we don't want people with those flaws to have too much power.
100%. Totally.
That's like the idea of the Constitution, as I understand it, is
yes.
We're all mortal. We're not God. We're all mortal. We're going to do dumb things.
Yeah.
Okay. Given that, don't give any small number of people too much power because they're also going to do dumb things.
Yeah. And when they do dumb things, if you give them too much power, their dumbness is magnified and can do much more damage. Yeah, and they can hurt people more than if you just let the dumbness bump around and fade off like, smoke fading into the distance.
The dopey things people do in their personal lives, by and large, don't have anywhere near the magnitude impact on other people as a small number of people with, as Joe Biden said, F-35s. That if you want to have your Second Amendment, you don't have F-35s. Okay, well, that's the kind of thinking that gets it so that now in Oregon to float the river, you have to get a boat permit to be on your inner tube.
Exactly.
So we get
it. Well, it's the fundamental flaw of utopian thinking. It's why utopias always fail. It's why, interesting ideas like, the Marxists had some good critiques of society. They had some actual, things that they pointed out that, they were right about that. But their attempt then to fix those things resulted in utopian thinking, which just obviously resulted in hundreds of millions of dead people in China and the Soviet Union during the last century.
Yeah, I guess I would add a third component then is to what I said, the two things earlier I said about, how I wish we could get back to. And the third thing would be, we're not God. We're not meant to be God.
Right.
You don't have to believe in my God, but you just can't think you're God if you're going to be in control.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Well, you have to
accept that notion. We're human. We're flawed.
And you accept that the universe is imperfectible as it's currently constituted. The universe is not a perfectible place. If you believe that it is perfectible, if you just get the right systems and the right laws in place, then you are going to screw up in a monumental place and make it a lot worse than if you just let it bumble along as it normally has.
At least our little bubble in the universe is not perfectible as we understand it.
Yeah,
it might be in Zeta Reticuli, but it's not here.
Not here. Yeah, exactly right. Yep. True story.
All right. Well, as Dave said in the beginning, if there's anything we said, especially that you think we got right or wrong, we'd love to hear your feedback. We're trying to explain to future generations what it's like to live through this tumultuous time. You can do that at unsilentpodcast.com. Rumble has a great comment section. And until next week, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be Unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.